August 17, 1943. 1,147 hours. 27,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. The Luftwaffe pilots who intercepted the American bomber formation that morning expected another easy victory. Their Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s had been slaughtering unescorted B-17s for months, and intelligence confirmed the flying fortresses were beyond the range of any Allied fighter escort. What climbed toward them through the cloud layer would shatter every assumption German fighter command had made about American air power. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, 7 tons of aircraft the Luftwaffe had dismissed as too heavy, too short-ranged, and too clumsy for effective fighter operations, was about to rewrite the rules of air superiority over Europe. The Germans called it der Jug, the Jug, mocking its bulbous fuselage. Within months, they would have another name, der Höllenjäger, the Hell Hunter. This massive fighter, powered by an engine that delivered more horsepower than any German aircraft, would transform the strategic bombing campaign and break the back of the Luftwaffe in ways that no Allied planner had initially envisioned. The intelligence failure had been comprehensive. Throughout the spring of 1943, Luftwaffe operational analysis had concluded that effective fighter escort deep into German territory was impossible. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Existing Allied fighters like the Spitfire and P-38 Lightning could barely reach the German border before fuel considerations forced them to turn back. German air defenses had been designed around this fundamental assumption. Major General Adolf Galland, commanding Luftwaffe fighter forces, had built his entire defensive strategy on the concept of the killing zone, the hundreds of miles of German airspace where American bombers would fly unprotected. Luftwaffe intelligence documents from May 1943, recovered after the war, detailed their assessment of Allied fighter capabilities. The P-47 Thunderbolt received particular attention, and the conclusions were devastating in their inaccuracy. German intelligence estimated the P-47's combat radius at approximately 175 miles, barely enough to reach the Dutch coast. Their analysis focused on the aircraft's weight, at 17,500 pounds fully loaded. It was nearly twice the weight of a Messerschmitt Bf 109G. German aeronautical engineers, working from photographs and pilot reports, calculated that such a heavy aircraft would be sluggish in combat and consume fuel at rates that made deep penetration missions impossible. The technical assessment compiled by Reckland Test Center, the Luftwaffe's primary aircraft evaluation facility, concluded that the P-47 represented typical American engineering philosophy: brute force over elegance, weight over maneuverability. The report, dated June 12, 1943, stated, the enemy's P-47 fighter, while possessing substantial firepower and robust construction, lacks the range and agility necessary for effective bomber escort beyond 200 kilometers from English bases. Our forces may engage American bombers without significant fighter interference once penetration exceeds this distance. This assessment would prove catastrophically wrong, but the error was understandable given the information available. What German intelligence could not know was that American engineers at Republic Aviation's Farmingdale facility had been secretly solving the range problem through innovations that would fundamentally alter strategic air warfare. The P-47's Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp engine produced 2,000 horsepower, exceptional power that did indeed consume fuel rapidly. But Republic's engineering team, led by Alexander Kartveli, had designed the aircraft around a revolutionary solution: massive internal fuel capacity augmented by external drop tanks that could be jettisoned when empty or when combat required maximum performance. The initial P-47C model carried 305 gallons of internal fuel. The improved P-47D, entering service in late 1943, increased internal capacity to 370 gallons. But the true revolution came with the development of pressurized drop tanks. The 108-gallon paper tanks initially used were quickly supplemented by 150-gallon steel tanks, and eventually 200-gallon models. With maximum external fuel load, a P-47D could carry over 700 gallons total, enough to escort bombers to targets the Germans considered completely beyond fighter range. German intelligence had failed to anticipate this development for a simple reason. They had never seen drop tanks as a primary solution to the range problem. Luftwaffe doctrine emphasized internal fuel capacity and aircraft designed specifically for their intended roles. The concept of a heavy fighter carrying disposable external fuel tanks that could extend range by 400 miles or more was outside their tactical framework. The first combat deployment of long-range P-47s caught German defenses completely unprepared. On August 17, 1943, the 8th Air Force launched simultaneous strikes against ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt and Messerschmitt production facilities at Regensburg. Luftwaffe controllers, monitoring the incoming raids, prepared for standard interception procedures, allow the short-range fighters to turn back, then engage the bombers in the killing zone at 1,147 hours. Elements of the 56th Fighter Group, flying P-47DS with 150-gallon drop tanks, appeared over Schweinfurt at 27,000 feet, 180 miles inside German territory. Luftwaffe controllers initially refused to believe the reports. Oberst Hannes Trottloff, commanding JG-54, received the radio call from one of his pilots. Thunderbolts over the target. Repeat, American fighters over Schweinfurt. His response, recorded in Luftwaffe communication logs. Impossible. Check your identification. No American fighter can reach this position. What followed demonstrated not just the P-47's unexpected range, but capabilities that shattered every German assumption about the aircraft's combat performance. The Thunderbolt pilots, led by Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke of the 56th Fighter Group, had orders to remain with the bombers until fuel consumption absolutely required their departure. At 1,153 hours, elements of Jägerschwader 26 and JG-1, approximately 40 Focke-Wulf 190s, began their attack runs on the bomber formation. The engagement that developed over the next 18 minutes would be analyzed by both Luftwaffe and USAF intelligence for months afterward. German pilots, expecting to face undefended bombers, instead found themselves in combat with fighters that possessed shocking advantages. The P-47's 8.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, mounted 4 in each wing, delivered a weight of fire that no German fighter could match. Each gun fired 800 rounds per minute, and convergence at 300 yards created a devastating cone of fire. Lieutenant Fritz Losigkeit, flying with JG-26, provided one of the most detailed German accounts of the engagement in his post-mission report. Made firing pass on bomber formation from 2 o'clock high. Immediately engaged by 4 Thunderbolts. Executed standard evasive dive. Enemy followed through vertical descent exceeding 6,000 meters. Achieved speeds estimated 750 kilometers per hour. Thunderbolt remained in pursuit throughout. This contradicts all previous intelligence regarding aircraft's diving performance. Losigkeit's observation touched on what would become the P-47's most devastating tactical advantage. German fighters, particularly the FW-190, had relied on dive attacks to engage bombers and escape pursuit. The standard Luftwaffe tactic against Allied fighters was simple: execute the attack, then dive away at speeds enemy fighters couldn't match. The P-47 could not only match these dives, it could exceed them. The physics were brutally simple. The P-47's massive weight, a seeming disadvantage in turning combat, became overwhelming advantage in vertical flight. The aircraft could achieve dive speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour, faster than any Luftwaffe fighter. German pilots who attempted their standard escape dive found Thunderbolts accelerating after them, closing the distance, and bringing those 8.50 caliber guns to bear. Oberst Joseph Priller, commanding JG-26, filed an urgent tactical assessment that evening. Enemy P-47 fighters demonstrated unexpected capabilities. Range significantly exceeds intelligence estimates. Aircraft maintains combat effectiveness at altitudes exceeding 8,000 meters. Most critically, diving speed equals or exceeds our own aircraft. Recommend immediate revision of engagement doctrine. Previous assumptions regarding Thunderbolt limitations are incorrect. The engagement over Schweinfurt on August 17 resulted in 7 Luftwaffe fighters confirmed destroyed with 4 probables, against 2 P-47s lost. More significantly, the bomber losses in the escorted portions of the mission were dramatically lower than in areas without fighter cover. Of the 60 B-17s lost that day, only 11 fell during periods when P-47s were present. This statistical reality would drive urgent changes in both American tactics and German defensive strategy. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe pilots was immediate and profound. For nearly a year, they had operated with the security of knowing that American bombers would eventually fly beyond their escort. The missions had been dangerous but followed predictable patterns. Now, that certainty evaporated. Radio intercepts decoded by Allied intelligence revealed the shift in German fighter pilot morale. August 18, 1043 hours. Request confirmation of Thunderbolt combat radius. Yesterday's engagement occurred 290 kilometers from enemy bases. August 19, 1534 hours. All units. Thunderbolts now considered long-range escort. Adjust interception timing accordingly. August 24, 0847 hours. Fighter Command requests immediate technical assessment of American drop tank capabilities. Current intelligence estimates proven inadequate. The technical reality behind the P-47's transformation was being refined with each mission. 8th Air Force engineering officers, working with combat reports, continuously improved tactics and equipment. Drop tank designs evolved from paper construction to pressed steel, increasing reliability and capacity. Pilots developed fuel management procedures that maximized range, cruise at optimal altitude, lean out the mixture for maximum efficiency, reserve internal fuel for combat operations. WWII September 1943. Standard procedure called for P-47s to fly to the combat area on external tank fuel, then drop the tanks before engaging enemy fighters. This meant the aircraft entered combat with full internal fuel, providing maximum performance and combat time. The discarded tanks, while expensive, transformed the strategic equation. Each mission pushed deeper into Germany, forcing Luftwaffe fighters to operate closer to their own bases and reducing their combat time over the bombers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The technical evolution that followed transformed the P-47 from adequate escort to dominant air superiority fighter. Republic Aviation's continuous improvements, driven by combat feedback, created successive variants that pushed deeper into German airspace. The P-47D-25, entering service in January 1944, featured increased internal fuel capacity and improved engine performance. Combat radius extended to 475 miles with external tanks, enough to reach Berlin itself. German aircraft designers struggled to respond. Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf engineers analyzed captured P-47 components and interrogated downed American pilots. The technical reports revealed a disturbing reality. American industrial capacity allowed continuous improvement of existing designs, while Germany struggled to maintain production of current models. A Focke-Wulf technical assessment from December 1943 concluded, "The enemy achieves through industrial volume what we pursue through engineering refinement. Each month brings improved American aircraft, while our factories struggle to replace losses." The Thunderbolt's ruggedness became legendary among both American pilots and German attackers. The R-2800 engine, with its 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows, could sustain damage that would destroy German engines. The radial configuration meant that losing several cylinders didn't necessarily mean losing the engine. Combat reports documented P-47s returning to base with massive battle damage. Cylinders shot away, oil lines severed, cowlings shredded. Yet, still flying, Lieutenant Robert Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron provided the most dramatic example on June 26, 1943. Intercepted by Oberleutnant Egon Meyer's FW-190. Johnson's P-47 absorbed over 200 hits from 20mm cannon and machine gun fire. The canopy shattered, the fuselage perforated, hydraulic systems destroyed. Johnson, wounded and struggling with controls, managed to fly the crippled Thunderbolt back across the Channel to England. The aircraft, later examined by Republic engineers, showed structural damage that should have been catastrophic. Yet the massive airframe had absorbed punishment that would have disintegrated lighter fighters. German intelligence reports from mid-1944 reflected growing frustration with the Thunderbolt's resilience. Major Heinz Barr, a 220 victory ace, filed an assessment that circulated through Luftwaffe Fighter Command. Engagement with P-47 requires ammunition expenditure 3 times greater than against Spitfire or P-38. The aircraft's structure absorbs damage without critical failure. Pilots demonstrate willingness to continue combat even with visible damage to their aircraft. Recommend focusing attacks on cockpit area as only reliably vulnerable point. The strategic impact multiplied as P-47 numbers increased. By March 1944, the 8th Air Force operated over 1,000 Thunderbolts across multiple fighter groups. The 4th, 56th, 78th, 352nd, 353rd, 356th, 359th, 361st, and 479th fighter groups all flew P-47s, creating an escort force that could protect bomber streams throughout their missions into Germany. Luftwaffe fighters, forced to engage through screens of Thunderbolts, suffered escalating losses. The numerical advantage compounded the technical superiority. German fighter pilots faced impossible mathematics. Even if they achieved favorable kill ratios, American production replaced losses within days, while Luftwaffe replacements took weeks or months. A captured Luftwaffe personnel report from April 1944 documented the crisis. Pilot losses exceed replacement rate by 40%. Experienced pilots being lost faster than training pipeline can replace. American fighter opposition now includes aircraft types and quantities that make successful bomber interception nearly impossible without prohibitive casualties. The P-47's 8.50 caliber machine guns proved devastating in combat. Each gun carried between 267 and 425 rounds, depending on position, providing approximately 30 seconds of total firing time. The convergence point, set at 300 yards, created a lethal cone where all 8 guns' fire intersected. Pilots who achieved proper position and trigger discipline could destroy German fighters with single bursts. Gun camera footage, analyzed by both American and German intelligence, showed the destructive effect. Bf-109s and Fw-190s literally disintegrating under the concentrated fire. The psychological warfare extended beyond simple combat. The distinctive sound of the P-47's turbo supercharger became an audio signature that German troops learned to recognize. The high-pitched whine, audible even above other engine noise, announced the Thunderbolt's presence before visual contact. Radio intercepts captured Luftwaffe ground controllers warning fighter pilots. Achtung! Turbo supercharger, sounds detected. Multiple Thunderbolts in sector. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The transformation of American fighter tactics reached maturity in early 1944 with the introduction of the fighter sweep. Rather than simply escorting bombers, P-47 groups began ranging ahead of the bomber stream, actively hunting Luftwaffe fighters before they could organize attacks. This tactical evolution exploited the Thunderbolt's extended range while leveraging its superior high-altitude performance. Major General William Kepner, commanding 8th Fighter Command, issued his famous directive in January 1944. Our mission is to destroy the German Air Force, in the air, on the ground, wherever we find them. The best way to protect our bombers is to destroy the enemy fighters before they can attack. This aggressive doctrine unleashed P-47 groups to pursue combat, rather than merely react to threats. The results were catastrophic for the Luftwaffe. On February 20th, 1944, during Big Week, operations targeting German aircraft production, 8th Fighter Command claimed 61 enemy aircraft destroyed. The 56th Fighter Group alone, led by Colonel Hubert Zemke, accounted for 18 confirmed kills. German loss records, examined after the war, confirmed 58 fighters destroyed that day, losses the Luftwaffe could not sustain. The ground attack capability of the P-47, initially an afterthought, evolved into a primary mission. The aircraft's ability to carry up to 2,500 pounds of bombs or 10 5-inch rockets, combined with its 8.50 caliber guns, made it a devastating ground attack platform. Pilots developed tactics for striking German airfields, rail yards, and supply columns. The heavy construction that made the P-47 resilient in air combat proved equally valuable during low-level attacks through intense flak. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski, the top P-47 ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the evolution. We learned the Thunderbolt could do everything. Escort bombers at 30,000 feet, dogfight German fighters, dive bomb targets, strafe trains and trucks, and bring us home through weather that would ground other aircraft. The Germans couldn't build anything that could match it. Across all those missions, the Luftwaffe attempted various countermeasures throughout. 1944, German fighter tactics evolved to avoid the P-47's strengths. Attempt to engage only with numerical superiority. Avoid extended dogfights, strike, and disengage quickly. These defensive tactics represented acknowledgement that German fighters could no longer control their own airspace. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, commanding JG-77, wrote in his diary, "We have become the hunted rather than the hunters. Every mission now focuses on survival rather than victory." German aircraft development programs attempted to counter the Thunderbolt's advantages. The Focke-Wulf Tu-152, designed for extreme high-altitude performance, entered limited production in 1945, too late and in too small numbers to matter. The Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter possessed speed advantages, but chronic engine reliability problems and fuel shortages limited its effectiveness. More critically, the Me-262 required lengthy takeoff and landing approaches where they were vulnerable to prowling P-47s. Allied fighters destroyed more Me-262s on the ground and, during takeoff, than were lost in air-to-air combat. The statistical evidence documented the Luftwaffe's collapse. In January 1944, German day fighter forces numbered approximately 1,650 aircraft. By June 1944, despite frantic production efforts, strength had fallen to fewer than 1,500. Losses exceeded 2,400 aircraft during those 6 months, unsustainable attrition that gutted unit effectiveness. More critically, experienced pilot losses mounted faster than training programs could replace them. The average experience level of Luftwaffe fighter pilots dropped from over 200 flying hours in early 1943 to fewer than 50 hours by mid-1944. American P-47 production, meanwhile, reached industrial-scale proportions that Germany could not match. Republic Aviation's Farmingdale and Evansville plants, combined with Curtiss-Wright's Buffalo facility, produced 15,683 P-47s during the war. At peak production in 1944, factories delivered over 1,200 Thunderbolts per month. This industrial tsunami meant that every P-47 lost in combat could be replaced within days. While Luftwaffe losses created permanent gaps in defensive coverage, the escort missions demonstrated the maturation of American strategic bombing doctrine. By mid-1944, bomber formations regularly penetrated to Berlin, Piemont, Schweinfurt, Regensburg, and other critical targets with P-47 escort for most of the mission. The addition of P-51 Mustangs for maximum range escort created a layered defense. P-47s dominated the initial and intermediate portions of missions, while Mustangs continued to target and back. The human cost of the P-47's dominance manifested in ways both American and German records documented. Luftwaffe pilot memoirs and post-war interrogations revealed the psychological impact of facing an opponent with overwhelming numerical and technical advantages. German pilots described the despair of watching American formations that blackened the sky, knowing that every engagement meant facing fighters they could neither outrun nor outlast. Hauptmann Heinz Nock, who survived the war with 33 victories, recorded in his diary the evolution of German fighter pilot morale. March 1944. Today we engage perhaps 50 Thunderbolts escorting bombers to Brunswick. We were 12 aircraft. The mathematics of survival have become impossible. May 1944. Lost 3 pilots today. All experienced men we cannot replace. The Americans lose 10 times our numbers, but replace them the next day. We are fighting arithmetic, not just airplanes. The physical toll on Luftwaffe pilots became severe as sortie rates increased and rest periods decreased. German fighter pilots flew multiple missions daily, often without adequate maintenance support or sufficient fuel for training flights. American pilots, by contrast, operated from well-supplied English bases with extensive maintenance support, regular rest rotations, and comprehensive training programs that produced steady streams of replacement pilots. The P-47's role expanded dramatically during the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944. Thunderbolt groups provided continuous air cover over the Normandy beaches, flew armed reconnaissance missions behind German lines, and established air superiority that prevented effective Luftwaffe interference with the invasion. The 36 P-47 groups operating from England flew over 1,400 sorties on D-Day alone, creating an aerial umbrella that protected the vulnerable landing forces. Colonel Zenke's 56th Fighter Group demonstrated the P-47's versatility during Operation Overlord. On June 7th, the group flew 4 separate missions: dawn patrol over the beachhead, mid-morning escort for bombers attacking road junctions, afternoon armed reconnaissance seeking German armored columns, and evening combat air patrol. The Thunderbolts destroyed 11 German fighters, bombed 3 bridges, and strafed numerous vehicles, all while maintaining protective coverage over Allied ground forces. The Luftwaffe's attempted response to the invasion demonstrated their depleted state. German fighter forces managed only 319 sorties on D-Day against over 14,000 Allied sorties. Oberst Joseph Prillner's famous lone attack on Sword Beach, immortalized in The Longest Day, occurred partly because his unit, JG-26, could muster only 2 serviceable fighters that morning. The entire Luftwaffe day fighter force in France numbered fewer than 300 operational aircraft on June 6, facing over 5,000 Allied fighters, including 18 P-47 groups. The ground support mission revealed another dimension of the Thunderbolts' impact. Throughout the Normandy campaign and subsequent operations across France, P-47s served as flying artillery, destroying German armor, vehicles, and fortifications. The .50 caliber API, armor-piercing incendiary, ammunition could penetrate light armor and set vehicles ablaze. Rockets and bombs demolished hardened positions. German ground forces learned to fear the appearance of Thunderbolts as much as their fighter pilots did. General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, specifically praised the P-47's contribution in his post-invasion assessment. The Thunderbolt fighter bombers proved invaluable in supporting ground operations. Their ability to deliver heavy ordnance while also providing air cover created a level of tactical air support unprecedented in military operations. German forces were effectively pinned down during daylight hours, unable to maneuver or resupply without risking devastating air attacks. The final months of 1944 saw P-47s operating with near impunity over German territory. Luftwaffe day fighter forces, decimated by losses and fuel shortages, could rarely contest American air superiority. The Thunderbolts ranged across Germany, attacking transportation networks, oil facilities, and airfields. The destruction of German synthetic fuel production proved particularly decisive. Without fuel, the Luftwaffe could not train pilots or operate the aircraft they still managed to produce. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 provided a final demonstration of air power's decisive role. When weather cleared on December 23, allowing air operations, P-47s and other Allied fighters savaged German armored columns advancing through the Ardennes. The Thunderbolts, operating from forward bases in France and Belgium, flew close support missions that destroyed tanks, supply vehicles, and troop concentrations. German forces, planned around the assumption that winter weather would ground Allied aircraft, found themselves exposed to the same aerial devastation that had destroyed their forces throughout 1944. The technical specifications that made the P-47 dominant deserve detailed examination, as they represent the engineering philosophy that won the air war. The R-2800 double Wasp engine, manufactured by Pratt & Whitney, stood as perhaps the most reliable aircraft engine of World War II. Its 18 cylinders, arranged in 2 rows of 9, displaced 2,804 cubic inches and produced 2,000 horsepower at war emergency power settings. More importantly, the engine could sustain combat damage and continue operating, a characteristic that saved countless pilots' lives. The turbo supercharger system, built by General Electric, enabled the P-47 to maintain performance at extreme altitudes. The system compressed thin high-altitude air, forcing it into the engine at pressures that maintained sea-level power output even above 30,000 feet. This gave the Thunderbolt decisive advantages in the high-altitude battles over Germany, while German fighters lost power in the thin air above 25,000 feet. The P-47 maintained full combat capability to 40,000 feet and beyond. The armament represented American firepower philosophy taken to its logical extreme. 8 and M2.50 caliber Browning machine guns, each capable of firing 750 to 850 rounds per minute, created a weight of fire unmatched by any other fighter. The .50 caliber round, while smaller than the 20mm cannons used by German fighters, proved devastatingly effective. The high velocity, flat trajectory, and reliability of the weapons made gunnery easier, while the ammunition capacity allowed sustained combat. Ammunition load varied by gun position. The outermost guns carried 267 rounds each, while inner positions held up to 425 rounds. Total ammunition capacity reached 3,400 rounds. In practice, this provided approximately 30 to 35 seconds of firing time if all guns were fired continuously, more than adequate for multiple engagement opportunities. Gun camera analysis showed that skilled pilots rarely needed more than 2 to 3 second bursts to destroy enemy aircraft. The structural design philosophy emphasized survival over agility. The P-47's airframe used heavy-gauge aluminum construction that could absorb remarkable battle damage. The radial engine provided a natural armor barrier protecting the pilot. Self-sealing fuel tanks, armor plate behind and beneath the pilot's seat, and bulletproof windscreen all contributed to survivability. Statistics compiled by the 8th Air Force showed that P-47 pilots had a significantly higher survival rate when shot down compared to pilots of lighter fighters. The combat record compiled by P-47 units documents their dominance. The 56th Fighter Group, the top-scoring P-47 unit, claimed 674.5 aerial victories and destroyed over 300 aircraft on the ground. The 4th Fighter Group added 550 aerial victories before transitioning to P-51 Mustangs in early 1944. Across all theaters, P-47s were credited with 3,752 aerial victories, against approximately 3,500 losses to all causes, a favorable exchange ratio even before considering the thousands of ground targets destroyed. Individual ace achievements in P-47s further illustrated the aircraft's capabilities. Colonel Zenke achieved 17.75 victories, all in P-47s. Lieutenant Colonel Gabreski scored all 28 of his European victories in Thunderbolts. Captain Robert Johnson claimed 27 victories without ever being shot down. These pilots and hundreds of others demonstrated that in skilled hands, the P-47 could dominate any opponent. The German perspective, documented in Luftwaffe records and post-war interrogations, acknowledged the P-47's role in their defeat. General Oberst Adolf Galland, in his post-war memoirs, wrote, "The appearance of long-range American fighters over Germany marked the beginning of our end in the air. The Thunderbolt, which we initially dismissed as too heavy for effective combat, proved to be a formidable opponent that we could neither escape nor outlast. Combined with American numerical superiority and unlimited fuel supplies, it created conditions we could not overcome." The strategic bombing campaign's success depended fundamentally on the P-47's ability to protect bombers during the critical phases of their missions. While the P-51 Mustang received more publicity for its longer range, the P-47 bore the burden of establishing air superiority during the crucial period of 1943 to 1944, without the Thunderbolt's ability to escort bombers deep into German territory and dominate German fighters in combat. The strategic bombing campaign might have failed. The industrial achievement represented by P-47 production matched its combat success. Republic Aviation's factories, staffed partially by women workers as men entered military service, maintained production schedules that seemed impossible by pre-war standards. Quality control remained exceptional despite rapid production, a testament to American industrial capability and the design's inherent robustness. The final accounting of the P-47's impact on World War II extends beyond statistics and technical specifications to fundamental questions about the nature of industrial warfare. The Thunderbolt represented the application of American industrial philosophy to aerial combat. Build it heavy, build it strong, build it in overwhelming numbers, and support it with unlimited resources. This approach contradicted European design philosophy that emphasized elegance, efficiency, and refinement. The Germans had entered the war with technically sophisticated fighters designed by brilliant engineers who optimized every component for maximum performance. The Bf-109 and Fw-190 represented the pinnacle of aeronautical engineering as understood in the late 1930s. Light, agile, powerful for their size. They dominated early war combat because they were flown by superbly trained pilots operating under doctrine developed through Spanish Civil War experience. The P-47 succeeded not by being more elegant, but by being more practical. It could be flown by average pilots and still achieve results. It could sustain damage and continue fighting. It could carry enough fuel to reach any target in Europe. It could deliver enough firepower to destroy any opponent. And most critically, it could be produced in numbers that overwhelmed any German response. This represented a fundamental shift in military aviation from artisan craftsmanship to industrial warfare. The psychological dimension of this shift manifested in the experiences of both American and German pilots. American pilots, knowing they flew aircraft backed by unlimited industrial support, could focus on completing their missions. Maintenance issues meant rapid replacement. Combat damage meant return to base and new aircraft. This created a psychological security that enhanced combat effectiveness. German pilots, by contrast, knew each mission might be their last, that damaged aircraft might not be replaced, that the tide of numbers grew worse every day. This despair degraded combat effectiveness more than any technical disadvantage. The bomber crews whose lives were saved by P-47 escort provided the most compelling testimony to the aircraft's value. 8th Air Force bomber losses dropped dramatically when escort range extended. Before long-range fighters, bomber crews faced near-suicidal odds on deep penetration missions. With P-47 escort, survival rates improved dramatically. Tens of thousands of American airmen survived the war because Thunderbolts kept German fighters away from their bombers. The post-war career of the P-47 demonstrated its fundamental soundness. The aircraft served with air forces worldwide into the 1960s, flying combat missions in Korea and with numerous other nations. While the P-51 received more glory, the P-47 proved more versatile and adaptable to evolving missions. Its ground attack capability made it valuable long after its air superiority role ended. The legacy extends to modern air combat doctrine. The P-47 demonstrated that air superiority requires more than technical excellence. It requires numbers, logistics, training, and industrial support. Modern air forces still grapple with balancing aircraft sophistication against procurement numbers. The P-47's lesson remains relevant. Sometimes the adequate aircraft available in quantity defeats the perfect aircraft available in limited numbers. The German expectation that American fighters couldn't reach Germany proved catastrophically wrong because it underestimated American engineering ingenuity and industrial capacity. The Luftwaffe planned for the war they expected to fight, while American forces created the war they needed to win. The P-47 Thunderbolt, dismissed as too heavy and too short-ranged, became the instrument that broke German air power and enabled Allied victory in the skies over Europe. The 15,683 P-47s produced during the war represented more than aircraft. They represented a philosophy of warfare that valued overwhelming force over refined elegance, practical effectiveness over theoretical perfection, and achievable mass production over unattainable excellence. In the final analysis, the Germans never expected the P-47 because they never imagined that such an approach could succeed. Their expectations, rooted in traditional military thinking, failed to account for the revolutionary nature of American industrial warfare, the streams of Thunderbolts that darkened German skies from 1943 onward didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe. They demonstrated that modern warfare belonged to those who could harness industrial capacity to military purpose. The psychological impact of facing endless American formations, each loss replaced within days, each pilot backed by unlimited fuel and ammunition, proved as decisive as any technical advantage. Victory belonged not to the most sophisticated fighter, but to the nation that could build adequate fighters in overwhelming numbers and support them with unlimited resources. The final mission flown by 8th Air Force P-47s occurred on May 7, 1945, the day before Germany's surrender. Even in victory, Thunderbolts patrolled German skies, a fitting conclusion to the aircraft that had transformed air warfare and shattered every German expectation about American fighter capabilities. The Hell Hunters had earned their name, and the Luftwaffe had learned too late that American industrial might, properly applied, could overcome any defensive strategy. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.